Venezuela syndrome, US military sonic attack, question mark, is the title of today's video. 50% of you have already stopped watching, and a further 30% of you will stop watching by the time I have finished speaking. However, if you are in the very minuscule minority of individuals that does possess an attention span that is greater than that of a goldfish, stick around to the very end of this video as we are going to explore the recent allegations that a US military attack in Venezuela was carried out by an elite band of Delta Force troops using a mystery sonic weapon, according to the testimony of a single eyewitness.
Now, did U.S. use a powerful mystery weapon during the raid to capture Nicolas Maduro? American forces wiped out hundreds of fighters without losing a single soldier. Now, a new report may shed some light on the methods used by them. According to the report, the U.S. used a powerful mystery weapon that rendered Venezuelan soldiers ineffective during the raid. The report is based on an alleged account of the night's event by a Venezuelan guard. Now, the account claims that the weapon brought Venezuelan soldiers to their knees. They were bleeding through the nose and vomiting blood.
So what is up, folks? Welcome back to this latest installment of unwatchable content, where we are going to be diving into a recent story that cropped up a few days ago about the United States military using a secret mystery sonic weapon on unsuspecting Venezuelan security forces, and this allegation comes from a surviving member of that Venezuelan security force that is suggesting and saying that the US military's technology was far greater and superior than that they could have ever imagined, and the technology that was used on that Venezuelan security force rendered some of those individuals bleeding from the eyes and puking blood, as well as having the inability to move and the symptoms and the feelings and sensations that their head was exploding from the inside out. Is this nothing more than a wag the dog propaganda story, or is there an element of truth from these allegations from this Venezuelan security guard who is yet to be identified? There is literally no evidence that this guy actually exists, but the White House themselves did in fact retweet his testimony, and was accompanied with the message, "Stop what you're doing and listen to this." So as always, folks, you must be aware to make of it what you will, but as always, we will be including some recent articles, a few videos, and for the plus factor for those of you who are interested, we've got patents from the United States that sort of all but confirm that the US military do indeed possess an arsenal of weapons that use frequencies, radio waves as weaponry to render individuals and structures absolutely useless. And in some cases, this technology can indeed destroy solid structures. So stay tuned, and I will see you at the very end to commence with the outro pleasantries. So let's start out here with the New York Post, which is a very American publication. World News. US used a powerful mystery weapon that brought Venezuelan soldiers to their knees during the Maduro raid. Witness account. This is actually from a couple of days ago, January the 10th, 2026, 11:15 p.m. Eastern time. It was published, but Washington The article starts out by saying the United States used a powerful mystery weapon that brought Venezuelan soldiers to their knees, bleeding through the nose and vomiting blood, during the daring raid to capture dictator Nicolas Maduro, according to a witness account. Now, here's the thing, guys. This is the one and only witness to this event ever happening, and it is a single individual, a guard, by all accounts, who posted a video claiming that these Venezuelan soldiers started bleeding from their nose, vomiting blood, and had horrible pulsating feelings and sensations within the head, and were unable to move or function or operate at all as a result of this sonic blast. But according to the witness account we just mentioned, was posted on Saturday last week on X, formerly known as Twitter, by the White House press secretary. In a jaw-dropping interview, the guard described how American forces wiped out hundreds of fighters without losing a single soldier, using technology unlike anything he has ever seen or heard. And that is a very common terminology in many of the events over the past few years. It's something, it's like unlike anything we've ever seen, or it's, never been seen before, or the first time this has ever occurred. A very popular trend with some of these, and no different with this article. The guard goes on to say that we were on guard, but suddenly our radar systems shut down without any explanation. The guard said, the next thing we saw, drones. A lot of drones flying over our position. We didn't know how to react. And there is a photograph very similar to the shock and awe campaign back in the second Iraqi war in the early 2000s. But moments later, a handful of helicopters appeared, barely 8 by his count, deploying what estimated were just 20 United States troops into the area. But those few men, he said, came armed with something far more powerful than guns. They were technologically very advanced, the guard recalled. They didn't look like anything we've fought against before. What ensued, he said, was not a battle but a slaughter. We were hundreds, but we had no chance, he said. They were shooting with such precision and speed, it felt like each soldier was firing 300 rounds per minute. Then came the weapon that still haunts him. Well, it's only like a few days ago. I would imagine it's not like a lifelong experience at this point. But at one point, they launched something. I don't know how to describe it, he said. It was like a suddenly very intense sound wave. I felt like my head was exploding from the inside. The effects were immediate and horrific. We all started bleeding from the nose, he said. Some were vomiting blood. We fell to the ground, unable to move. We couldn't even stand up. After that sonic weapon, whatever it was, so his first thought was it was a sonic weapon, but it could have been something else. He wasn't too sure. But the White House did not immediately respond to a question regarding whether Caroline Leavitt's sharing of the post, captioned, "Stop what you are doing and read this," indicated the administration was verifying the veracity of the eyewitness account. An estimated 100 Venezuelan security forces were killed in the January 3 attack, according to the country's interior ministry. It is unclear if any of those deaths were caused by the mystery weapon. The outmatched defenders were helpless as the small United States unit wiped them out, the guard said. Those 20 men without a single casualty killed hundreds of us, he claimed. We had no way to compete with their technology, with their weapons. I swear I'd never seen anything like it. The military has had directed energy weapons which neutralize targets using focused energy, such as microwaves or laser beams, for years. But could this be the first time it's been used in combat by the United States? An ex-US intelligence source told the Post China reportedly used a microwave weapon in 2020 against Indian soldiers during a border dispute in Ladakh. The source noted that those weapons have the capability to produce at least some of the symptoms, including bleeding, inability to move or function, pain, and burning. I can't say all of those symptoms, but yes, the source said, and we had versions for decades. But after the raid, said the Maduro loyalist, the message couldn't be more clear. Don't tangle with Uncle Sam. It does sound like this is very much propaganda. They're using this guard to say how absolutely fantastic and technologically advanced the United States is, and how it was pointless and futile to put up any resistance against Uncle Sam. But the guard goes on to say, I am sending a warning to anyone who thinks they can fight the United States, he said. They have no idea of what they are capable of. After what I saw, I never want to be on the other side of that again. They are not to be messed with. The guard said the raid has already sent shockwaves across Latin America, especially after President Trump recently warned that Mexico is now on the list. Everyone is already talking about this, he said. No one wants to go through what we went through. What happened here is going to change a lot of things, not just in Venezuela, but throughout the region. And that is that article concluded. So, as I said, this is from the New York Post, and it does sort of tingle with quite a little bit of propaganda rather than an actual event. This seems very, very wag the dog to me. But let's go over and head to another all-American publication, Forbes, from an article that came out about 17 hours ago at the time of recording. As promised, here we are at Forbes.com, and they are headlining this article, Epic Win, epic in all capitals. US secret weapon may have incapacitated Maduro's guards, and this is by David Hambling, senior contributor. Published 13th of January 2026 at 5:45 Eastern Standard Time, although I don't know why I read that, but just to let you know, for reference, I guess. But anyway, we had no way to compete with their technology, with their weapons. I swear I've never seen anything like it, a Venezuelan security guard says in a video widely shared on social media and promoted by the White House. And, you know, there you go, because it is promoted by the White House suggests strongly, guys, that this is nothing more than propaganda. But we will discover that the United States does in fact have quite an arsenal of sonic weaponry, and we will be probably looking at some patents for those of you who stick around long enough to get to that part of the video. But as I said, guys, this is reeking of propaganda, and why would the White House want to release a video or promote a video about a guard talking about United States atrocities using secret weapons? But the other thing is, it sort of needs to be bared into consideration, is that at the moment there are no Geneva Convention regulations or rules of engagement that include sonic weaponry, EMF directed energy weapons. These are sort of not conventional weapons at the time that was drawn up, and now, you know, there is sort of no regulatory rules of engagement that prohibit this, as opposed to sort of using something like napalm or mustard gas. But the guard, his account tells, US Special Forces in Venezuela captured then President Maduro using new technology which incapacitated the entire protective team and allowed 24 US troops to easily defeat hundreds of defenders. And unverifiable and scarcely credible stories like this are common enough in wartime, but in this case, there might just be real-world weapons technology behind it. Sonic weapon attack. The interview spread rapidly after being retweeted by no less than White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt with the comment, "Stop what you are doing and read this." The account, which cannot be verified, describes an attack which the interviewee struggles to put into words. God. At one point, they launched something, and I don't know how to describe it. It was like a very intense sound wave. Suddenly, I felt like my head was exploding from the inside. We all started bleeding from the nose. Some were vomiting blood. We fell to the ground, unable to move. Interviewer: "And your comrades, did they manage to resist?" Security guard: "No, not all of them. Those 20 men, without a single casualty, killed hundreds of us." I mean, who really talks like that? Especially, if you were part of a protective team that just saw like your entire unit massacred by these 20 guards. I doubt I would be singing their praises. I would be more likely cursing them to damnation. But he says, "I swear I've never seen anything like it. We couldn't even stand up after that sonic weapon or whatever it was." But this might seem like a far-fetched excuse from what Maduro's guards failed to protect him, taking heavy casualties while a small force abducted the man that they were supposed to defend with their lives. In fact, the US has spent decades researching weapons to produce the type of effects described. The Joint Non-Lethal Weapons Directorate gets to work. In the early 90s and early 2000s, the Pentagon poured resources into the Joint Non-Lethal Weapons Directorate, now rebranded the Joint Intermediate Force Capabilities Office. Their task was to develop non-lethal or less lethal weapons which fall somewhere in the spectrum between shouting and shooting. These would disable or incapacitate people without harming them. And there is one of the US military's sonic weapons from their arsenal, the active denial system that has been around for quite some time, and it shoots microwave pain beams in a range of several hundred meters. But the idea was that future wars, in particular insurgencies, would require the carefully calibrated use of force. For example, when dealing with riots and acts of resistance like stone throwing in the 3-block war, there might be high-intensity combat in one block, peacekeeping operations in the next block, and humanitarian aid missions in the next. Troops need to be able to respond without causing civilian deaths and escalating the situation. Existing weapons like rubber bullets, water cannon, and tear gas are seen as both ineffective and too dangerous. The term less lethal was adopted because even weapons not intended to kill can be deadly. There are dozens of recorded deaths from rubber bullets. The Pentagon worked on a wide variety of concepts, including strobe dazzlers, malodorants, and electroshock projectiles, plus oddities like laser flashbang, pulsed energy projectile, and one of the biggest was the millimeter wave, the active denial system, which we just saw a picture of, or pain beam, which could inflict severe pain and drive back rioters from several hundred meters away. While many of these systems were deployed, none was notably successful. Active denial was an expensive truck-sized unit that took several hours to reach operating temperature before it could be used. There were also numbers of projects for acoustic weapons, sonic blasters. Sound has arguably been used as a weapon since the invention of military music, not just the horns of Jericho, but the drums used to intimidate and overraw enemies. the British government's classified bagpipes as weapons of wars right up until 1996. And they can be quite beautiful bagpipes, but they can quite be annoying in the same token. It's a very fine line with bagpipes. But serious development of sonic weapons started in World War II, with developments of systems loud enough to cause physical damage by sheer volume, like the Nazi Schallkanon or sound gun, which could burst eardrums from 50 meters away. This was, however, much less efficient than a conventional armament. Loud noise alone was not an effective non-lethal weapon, and researchers explored what are termed non-acoustic effects, physical or psychological effects caused by an audible sound, or by an infrared or high-frequency ultrasound. There are a myriad of urban legends about the effects of sound, such as the low-frequency browner, which causes hearers to lose control of their bowels, but this has never been replicated. There are more plausible accounts of sick building syndrome caused by infrasound, but specific cause and effect have proved hard to pin down. Many developers claimed that their acoustic weapons could produce paralysis, panic attacks, or other effects, but Dr. Jürgen Altmann's definitive 1998 work, Acoustic Weapons, a Prospective Assessment, did not find any credible claims of non-acoustic effects. The nearest thing to a sonic weapon deployed by US forces is the Long-Range Acoustic Device, or LRAD. And while this is something termed a sonic cannon, the makers are keen to emphasize that it is not a weapon, merely a hailing device which can be used to convey messages from a distance, whether a warship hailing a small boat or security forces telling a crowd to disperse. While civil rights campaigners have complained about the police use of LRAD in the United States and elsewhere, there is no evidence it is more harmful than other sound sources. EPIC, electromagnetic interdiction. However, while the guard thought the weapon for this squad was sonic, it may have been something else entirely. Frequencies, folks. Back in 2008, I talked to developers working on a patented device known as electromagnetic personnel interdiction control. EPIC, under the contract for the Marine Corps. EPIC uses radio waves to excite and interrupt the normal processes of human hearing and equilibrium. Effectively, the tiny hairs in the inner ear act as radio antennas. One factor that made this approach useful was that, unlike sound waves, the radio waves work through walls and other obstacles. And there is a picture from the patent there. Image from the patent for the electromagnetic personnel interdiction control method and system, US Patent Office. Spoiler alert, guys, we will be coming to that pattern shortly. But specifically, EPIC seeks to temporarily disable the vestibular system which controls balance. The target would not be able to stand up, let alone walk. Eye tracking would be affected. That unpleasant sensation that the room is spinning is caused by vestibular problems, so anyone affected might not even be able to see straight. According to the patent, EPIC will produce incapacitation sufficient to temporarily render the subject powerless to resist arrest or subjugation. Removal of the electromagnetic energy leaves the nerve cells and surrounding tissues with no damage, and second-order effects of severe motion sickness and psychological effects of helplessness remains until the subject's body chemistry returns to normal. Imagine the minds that come up with these ideas. Imagine pitching that weapon to the CEO. of your corporation. But when I talked to the developers, they were still working with chinchillas and planning to graduate to rats. I'd have thought they'd have chinchillas are probably more expensive than rats to use as lab animals, especially sort of the price of chinchilla coats, but maybe that's what they repurposed them for once they finished experimenting on them. Wouldn't rule that out. Soylent Green a little bit type of mentality there. But these would be trained to traverse a course for a food reward. The researchers have planned to determine if EPIC could prevent rats from moving. This elaborate setup was required because, as the developer explained, a stationary rat with a disabled vestibular system does not show any outward signs beyond hunkering down. Unlike bipeds, if they do not fall over. There is no evidence that EPIC progressed beyond early laboratory stages. We do not even know if it worked on rats. It probably was then classified once they sort of reached the effects that they got and sort of pretended that it went away and we weren't working on it anymore. We don't even know if it worked on rats, let alone humans. There are no known contracts for further development, and the Joint Intermedia Force Capabilities Office does not mention any such capability, and no such weapon has ever been openly displayed or demonstrated. However, the effects described in the Venezuela attack appear consistent with EPIC technology. The radio pulse might be perceived as a loud sound as it hits the inner ear, and it might give a feeling that the head is exploding. If it worked as intended, it would specifically cause the victims to fall over and not be able to recover their feet or aim a weapon. Some suffering from extreme motion sickness would likely vomit, though they would not vomit blood. The feeling of helplessness seems to have been effectively induced. Certainly, this sounds like exactly the type of weapon that special forces might use to disable defenders before going in to capture a high-value target alive. That is, of course, if it exists, the article adds. Because it is likely that the whole account is pure propaganda, as I've stated, guys, with no relation to reality, and EPIC never progressed as a weapon, although I'm pretty sure EPIC did progress as a weapon. Maybe they renamed it something else. But the security guard whose identity cannot be confirmed says, "I'm sending a warning to anyone who thinks they can fight the United States. They have no idea what they're capable of. They're not to be messed with." A line which could hardly be more perfect if it was scripted by the White House and included a grain of plausible truth, like a real if unproven technology makes propaganda more effective. The Venezuelan account would be easy to dismiss as classic tinfoil hat story, but as further accounts of electromagnetic hardware supposedly causing the Havana syndrome hit the news, we can expect a lot more interest in this area. I don't know what's that. Blue Jays land a 27-year-old outfielder after he cuts ties with the Yankees, and a paywall has just popped up there. No thanks. So we're not going to become a member. That was one of our 4 free articles. So as I said, guys, make of it what you will, but at least Forbes is suggesting that this is sort of a propaganda, although they did open with some sort of glorifying of this epic raid in Venezuela, unlike the New York Post, which sort of supported the eyewitnesses' claims as actual fact, whereas Forbes did provide us with a little bit more of an objective view. And again, it supports my thoughts that very much this is just a story of propaganda, but the United States is been known to create and develop some very nefarious technologies, and have also not only developed nefarious technologies that use frequencies to cause all sorts of unpleasant symptoms. They've even experimented on their own citizens. So let's watch a video or two before we come back with some more articles and patents.
It's been over a week since U.S. captured Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. American forces bombed capital city and then raided the military complex where Maduro and his wife were staying. Well, Venezuela maintains that at least 100 people have been killed by the American forces as they were abducting Maduro. However, not one American soldier was killed. The question is, how did the U.S. pull off such a successful raid? Well, new reports say that they may have used a secret weapon to put Maduro's guards out of action.
On the night of January 3rd, Venezuela's capital, Caracas, was attacked by the US military. The Americans bombed several military facilities in and around Caracas, and then sent in choppers to abduct Venezuela's president, Nicolas Maduro. Maduro and his wife were sleeping at the Fuerte Tiuna military base. A number of senior Venezuelan officials lived there, and the base was among the locations targeted by the American strikes. Then, Delta Force commandos were lowered into the compound, and they proceeded to capture Maduro. But the commandos still had to face dozens of guards who were protecting the Venezuelan president. Many of them were from Cuba, because Maduro reportedly trusted Cubans more than his own security staff. But dozens of the guards were slain while the Americans extracted Maduro. One of the survivors, however, has given an eyewitness account of the raid. He said that they were completely outmatched by the American soldiers, and one part of his testimony stood out. He claimed that the US military used a powerful sonic weapon which brought the guards to their knees. The survivor recounted that many of the guards started bleeding through the nose, and some even vomited blood. He said that the trigger was an intense sound wave, and when he heard it, he felt as though his head was exploding from the inside. So, does this mean that the US now has sonic or ultrasonic weapons? Ones capable of incapacitating large crowds? Well, the Americans have had something like that for years, and they even sell it to other countries. This is the LRAD 450, mounted on a Serbian Land Rover. LRAD stands for Long Range Acoustic Device, and the Americans have been using these for years. They are sound cannons, which are usually used as specialized loudspeakers, but they can also be weaponized and used for crowd control. This is a video from Serbia taken during protests back in March 2025. These were anti-corruption protests, but suddenly the protesters started running away, and there was a stampede. It was reportedly caused by the Serbian police using a sound cannon to disperse the protesters. Many of the demonstrators later complained of headaches, ear pressure, and nausea. But Serbia denied using the sonic weapon on the crowd. Its use as a crowd control device is banned in many countries. China also has similar devices. They were used against protesters in Hong Kong back in 2019. Thailand was seen deploying the device as well. It was used against Cambodia last September. The company that makes this device says that there are mobile versions available, which can be mounted on helicopters. If these are the sonic cannons that are for sale, that are publicly known, what does the US military have access to? And could an advanced version of the sound cannon have been used in Venezuela? US Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt highlighted a social media post which contained the surviving Venezuelan guards' account of the raid. Is that an admission by the White House?
Claims that the United States deployed an unknown and highly advanced weapon during its operation to capture Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro have sparked intense global attention following a dramatic eyewitness account shared online by the White House press secretary. The account, reported by the New York Post, recounts how Venezuelan security forces were allegedly incapacitated within minutes by a technology described as unlike anything previously encountered in combat. According to the guard quoted in the Post, Venezuelan troops were on routine alert when their defensive systems abruptly failed. He said radar screens went dark without warning, leaving forces blind and disoriented. Almost immediately, swarms of drones appeared overhead, followed by a small number of U.S. helicopters. The Guard estimated that fewer than 10 helicopters deployed roughly 20 American troops, a force he described as vastly outnumbered by Venezuelan defenders. Despite the numerical imbalance, the witness said the U.S. unit overwhelmed hundreds of fighters with extraordinary speed and precision. He claimed American soldiers moved with a level of coordination and firepower that made resistance impossible, describing the encounter not as a battle, but as a one-sided assault. "We were hundreds, but we had no chance," he said, adding that the rate and accuracy of fire felt overwhelming. The most disturbing moment, however, came when the Guard described the deployment of a mysterious device. He said the Americans released something that produced an intense, crushing force, which he could only compare to a powerful sound wave. The sensation, he claimed, felt as if his head was exploding from within. Within seconds, soldiers around him reportedly began bleeding from their noses, vomiting blood, and collapsing to the ground, unable to move or stand. The White House has not confirmed whether the reposting of the account by Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, accompanied by the caption, "Stop what you are doing and read this," constitutes official verification of the claims. Venezuela's Interior Ministry has stated that approximately 100 members of its security forces were killed during the January 3rd operation. It remains unclear how many of those deaths, if any, may be linked to the alleged weapon described in the account. A former U.S. intelligence source, cited in the reporting, suggested that the symptoms described resemble the effects of directed energy weapons, a category of military technology that uses focused energy, such as microwaves or lasers, to disable targets. The source said the U.S. military has possessed versions of such systems for decades and acknowledged that some are capable of causing bleeding, pain, disorientation, and temporary loss of bodily function. However, the source stopped short of confirming whether such a weapon was used in Venezuela. The Venezuelan Guard said the raid has sent a chilling message across the region. He warned that the operation demonstrated capabilities far beyond conventional warfare and claimed it has already triggered widespread fear throughout Latin America, especially after President Donald Trump recently warned that Mexico was on the list. "I'm sending a warning to anyone who thinks they can fight the United States," he said. "After what I saw, I never want to be on the other side of that again."
The United States is now urging its citizens to leave Venezuela immediately. In a stark warning issued by the U.S. State Department, Americans were told to depart the country as soon as possible, as international flights resume and the security situation rapidly deteriorates. Officials say armed civilian militias, known as colectivos, are setting up roadblocks, stopping vehicles, and searching for signs of U.S. citizenship or support for Washington. Venezuela remains under the highest U.S. travel advisory, level 4, citing severe and ongoing threats to Americans on the ground. The warning comes just days after U.S. forces captured Venezuelan leader Nicolás Maduro and his wife, Celia Flores, in a dramatic operation that has sent shockwaves across the region and beyond. Yet from Washington, President Donald Trump is projecting confidence. Posting on social media, Trump declared he is already making Venezuela rich and safe again, just 1 week after Maduro's capture, offering no evidence, but thanking those who made it possible. At the White House, Trump met with top U.S. energy executives, urging them to invest in rebuilding Venezuela's oil infrastructure. He promised a new formula to divide oil revenues, saying Venezuela needs money, and the United States will decide how much it gets. On Friday, Trump signed an executive order shielding U.S.-held revenues from Venezuelan oil sales, blocking courts or creditors from touching the funds, and cementing Washington's control over billions of dollars tied to Venezuela's vast reserves. The White House says the move advances U.S. foreign policy goals. But in Caracas, Venezuela's acting president Delcy Rodriguez delivered a furious response. Calling Maduro's capture a criminal aggression, Rodriguez vowed to govern until his return, insisting the Venezuelan people, not Washington, remain in charge. She warned the operation would be remembered as a permanent stain on U.S.-Venezuela relations and urged citizens to remain united, calling the Caribbean a territory of peace. Caribbean Sea, which must be a territory of peace. From here, once again, we will not stop condemning the criminal aggression against the Venezuelan people that occurred in the early morning of January 3, 2026. It will go down in history as a great stain on relations between the United States and Venezuela. So here there is no doubt. Here there are no levels of uncertainty. No, 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 no. Here the Venezuelan people rule, and there is a government, the government of President Nicolás Maduro, and I have the responsibility to take charge while his kidnapping lasts. So this is the message for all of Venezuela. Let us keep marching together. Let us keep marching united, guaranteeing happiness, guaranteeing life, guaranteeing the future, and guaranteeing peace. Johanna, thank you. The defense of the peace of our homeland. There we are bringing together all of Venezuela, all Venezuelan men and women, to reject the vile and criminal attack of January 3 and to condemn that our head of state, President Nicolás Maduro, has been kidnapped. Maduro's son echoed that message. Speaking at rallies demanding his father's release, Nicolas Maduro Guerra claimed the government is following a 5-point negotiation plan, personally approved by Maduro before his capture. He insisted Maduro is calm, defiant, and still considers himself Venezuela's president, even as he faces trial in New York, where he has declared himself a prisoner of war.
I tell you, everything that is happening, everything we are doing today as a government was the plan of Nicolas Maduro, which he personally approved himself. Everything. We are following his instructions. He left the line marked and he was prepared for everything. If something happens to me, here is this path and you know what you have to do. Here is the plan of the homeland. Here is the plan of the 7 transformations. Here is the negotiation plan approved by him. The 5 points that President Nicolas Maduro approved in December are what we are working on today, and the prosperity that the country will achieve is the plan that the president approved. We are following his instructions with our older sister, Delcy Rodriguez, at the head of the acting presidency and the collective team of the high political command. Now they do tell the truth. Anyone who believes them is peeing outside the pot. You have to listen to the leaders. You have to listen to where the information comes from. Unity. Unity. If before you disliked someone, well, now you cannot dislike them anymore. We have to love each other, all of us, because the only way to guarantee peace in Venezuela, to guarantee prosperity in Venezuela, and for Nicolas and Celia to return is that we remain united and in government in Venezuela, that the revolution continues to be the government. Unity around the high political command, all support to the acting president, Delcy Rodriguez, to Dr. Jorge Rodriguez, president of the National Assembly of Venezuela, to Diosdado Cabello, Minister of Interior, Justice, and Peace, to the Bolivarian government, to the Socialist Party and the Great Patriotic Pole, a coalition that includes the PSUV, to the Bolivarian National Armed Force. A round of applause for the armed force, our armed force dignified, resilient. Later, the truth will be known about how we fought. It's not for me to say it, it will correspond to the truth. Let us be patient. We are under investigation, but we will know how our heroic armed force fought until the very last second to protect our president. I saw him when he arrived in New York. "Happy New Year, good night," my father said, with his serenity, with his composure. I have known him since I was born. I said it yesterday in a video conference. And when I heard his tone, my aunt, his older sister, called me and perceived the same thing I did. He is at peace because he has a deep faith in our Lord Jesus Christ, and because he has peace of conscience, the peace that comes from a clear conscience, peace of the soul, peace of the spirit. Let us have no doubt that they will return. That feeling we may have of helplessness, of pain, of anger must be turned into loving strength, because we are not a vengeful people. We are a people in resistance, but our feeling must be love and turning it into organization. Throughout the people of Venezuela, there is a great national consensus rejecting the criminal aggression of which Venezuela was a victim on January 3rd. The world has its eyes on Venezuela. They're watching us. They are seeing the tremendous dignity of the Venezuelan people. They are seeing the fury of the Venezuelan people that transforms into dignity and becomes organization. The second task is to remain in permanent mobilization. Permanent. Every day, go out to the streets, put up a leaflet, keep the flame alive. Keep demanding the release of the innocents, Maduro and Celia.
The fallout is now global. Protests have erupted in London, Paris, and Seoul, with demonstrators accusing the United States and its allies of imperialism, resource plunder, and illegal intervention.
I'm here defending Venezuela's sovereignty. I'm mainly opposing British imperialism's role on the war against the Venezuelan people. British imperialism has been involved in the war against Venezuela economically, including the role, the nefarious role in the sanctions, but also actually seizing gold from Venezuela, including during the COVID pandemic, where the Venezuelan government was not even allowed to use that gold here in the Bank of England. They're up to their necks in the role on the war against Venezuela. So we're here demanding that the United Kingdom stops the war against Venezuela. There is no way the United States, any president of the United States, has any right to accuse any government of anything. given the United States that have brought tens and tens of millions of deaths around the world, that has invaded Latin America, Asia, Africa, they have no rights to do that. And obviously, they have no rights over our oil or our resources.
We're here to say specifically to our own government that we have to make a strong statement to call for the immediate release of Nicolas Maduro, and it's not for any other country to determine who and who cannot govern other countries. We saw the situation with the tankers off the coast of Venezuela recently, in which Britain gave direct support in the taking of the Russian tanker. This is a really dangerous situation to confront with Russia in the ocean. That could lead to a direct war of Russia, which would harm everyone in this country.
I'm here to support the Venezuelan cause, to support the Bolivarian Revolution, and to also protest against the sheer immorality of not only Trump's kidnapping of Nicolas Maduro, the democratic elected leader of Venezuela, but also the equal morality of our own government colluding with that act. Is not only a violation of international law, it's also a violation of the articles of the Organization of American States, to which Washington is a signatory.
I want to condemn the criminal attack against Venezuela government, Venezuelan people, Venezuela economy, Venezuela, all the values of Venezuela. If it is happening in Venezuela, can happen in any part of the world, because as all the time USA treat us as guinea pigs and trying to test with us. This is one example what he is willing to do in any part of the world. Trump already threat to Colombia and Mexico and Cuba, and he's no stop like attacking the countries that they are defending Venezuela, and they told, okay, I'm going for you then. To Petro.
In Paris, crowds marched near the Eiffel Tower, chanting "Yankees lead Latin America," as a French lawmaker accused European governments of becoming accomplices to Washington.
No one can prevent this crime. There is no force capable of doing so. And among the countries that do have such force, like China, for example, only China could intervene. But it is not China's policy. China does not interfere in the internal affairs of other countries. I have absolutely no confidence, for example, in the French government, or the British government, or the German government, which keep bowing to demands first from Biden and now from Trump. I believe the solution will come from the mobilization of the people. That is what can stop this barbarity. Donald Trump can afford to do all the things he is doing today because since he has been in the White House, all the other states, especially the European states, not only do nothing to oppose these actions, but allow him to proceed and become supporters and accomplices of them.
If Venezuela falls, it will be Colombia's turn next, then Brazil, Mexico, and Cuba, because other countries such as Chile, Argentina, and Paraguay have already aligned themselves with the United States. And in South Korea, hundreds rallied outside the U.S. Embassy, calling Trump's actions a violation of international law and national sovereignty.
It has now been fully exposed that the real purpose was to plunder Venezuela's oil resources. The arrest of President Maduro is illegal, and even in the U.S. courts it appears that prosecutors are dropping the charge labeling him as the leader of the so-called solar cartel, showing that they themselves have lost any justification for this war. We regard President Maduro as the leader of a government that stands for the great anti-imperialist people, and we strongly condemn Trump for expanding war into Latin America. If there are difficulties in Venezuela, it is for the Venezuelan people themselves to address those. Trump's intervention is a violation of international law and an infringement on national sovereignty. I often see people online arguing that international law does not matter because everyone breaks it, but I think that argument is completely wrong. Only by raising our voices together to condemn the United States and Trump for violating international law can we move toward peace.
I hope Trump will stop interfering around the world. I also think that even some of Trump's own supporters are now turning against him. Isn't it contradictory for someone who claims to pursue an isolationist policy to intervene in Venezuela? It makes no sense.
As anger spreads abroad and fear grows inside Venezuela, the contrast could not be sharper. Washington speaks of oil, order, and opportunity. Caracas speaks of kidnapping, resistance, and survival. And for Americans still inside Venezuela, the message tonight is clear: get out now.
So this is the first of several patents we are going to scan through very quickly, as patents can be quite tedious to read and get through. But this patent US 7841989B2 is for the electromagnetic personal interdiction control method and system, otherwise known as EPIC, the technology that we heard about in the previous article from Forbes, before we had a little segue for a video or two. But this application was filed by Invocon Inc. on the 4th of October 2005. However, its current status is expired around 2010, but they had an adjusted expiration to 2029, and the 19th of May of 2029 is when this patent application actually will expire. So it had expired, but then they adjusted the expiration, which suggests they're still working on this. But the abstract is a non-lethal and non-destructive electromagnetic personnel interdiction control stun type weapon system and method that utilizes beamed radio frequencies, beamed radio frequency energy in a frequency range and modulated to impose a Lorentz force on the vestibular system or sensory cells of a remote human subject, sufficient to disrupt the mechanical transduction process and stroke or the chemical engine by which sound, position, and other sensory input are converted into messages by nerve cells and processed by the brain to produce complete disorientation, confusion, and incapacitation, sufficient to temporarily render the subject powerless to resist arrest or subjugation. Removal of the electromagnetic energy leaves the nerve cells and surrounding tissues with no damage, and second-order effects of severe motion sickness and psychological effects of helplessness remains until the subject's body chemistry returns to normal. There is a diagram. We actually did see a little glimpse of that in that article from Forbes, but we can kind of see on the left-hand side there's sort of an individual holding up what looks like it could be a shield or an extremely large cell phone, and then on the right-hand side of the image is an individual running towards it, and I guess once he sort of becomes in the field of range, then he will be affected by those electromagnetic frequencies. But here are some of the claims. It is a non-lethal method for immobilizing a human subject by utilizing electromagnetic energy to disrupt the subject's sense of balance and perception of body position and movement, compromising the steps of providing means for generating and transmitting a beam of radio frequency, electromagnetic energy having a selected frequency and modulation correlated to a physical and chemical structure of a human sensory cell to disrupt proper operation operation of either a mechanical transduction process or a chemical process by which sensory inputs is converted by the sensory cell to messages that are processed by a human brain, and directing said beam of radio frequency electromagnetic energy from a remote location towards the human subject to be immobilized to impose a Lorentz force on selected sensory cells of the subject sufficient to disrupt proper orientation of the cell's mechanical transduction process or chemical process, and alter the sensory input converted into messages processed by the subject's brain to adversely affect the perception of body position and movement so as to produce disorientation, confusion, and incapacitation sufficient to immobilize and render the subject powerless. The method, according to Claim 1, wherein said step of directing said beam of radio frequency electromagnetic energy from a remote location towards a human subject to be immobilized, compromises in opposing a Lorentz force on a sensory receptor hair cells of vestibular organs of the subject's inner ear that are connected by auditory nerves operating on an exchange of ionized calcium and potassium through semi-permeable cell membranes to produce electrical impulses through the auditory brainstem to the auditory cortex of the brain, which interprets the nerve impulses as sound or position relative to gravity, and the said Lorentz force causing random excitation or movement of said hair cells so as to disrupt the exchange of ionized calcium and potassium and produce sensations of an intense wideband sound and confusion between the subject's visual perception and the vestibular sensations transmitted to the subject's brain, and the affected subject's perception of the subject's body position relative to gravity, resulting in disorientation sufficient to immobilize, yada yada, whoop-de-woo, the subject powerless, ray-tay-tay. We're only going to read this third claim, and then we're going to go off to another pattern. You guys, if you want, can come back and look into this more on your own recourse, but I know you won't. The method, according to Claim 1, wherein said step of directing said beam of radio frequency electromagnetic energy from a remote location towards the human subject to be immobilized, compromises imposing a Lorentz force on cells of the subject's cochlear and retina tissues, such that electromagnetic field and subsequent surface charges on the cochlear and retina tissues changes the impedance of their conduction capabilities to disrupt ion flow that regulates nerve pulse output to the subject's brain and produce confusion between the subject's visual perception and the vestibular sensations transmitted to the subject's brain that affect the subject's perception of the subject's body position relative to gravity, resulting in disorientation, yada yada, whoop-de-woo, ray-tay-tay, and these effects will immobilize the subject and he won't be able to resist arrest. So there you go, guys. That was the patent US 7841989B2 for EPIC, the electromagnetic personnel interdiction control method and system. Next up, guys, we're going to go... Oh, that wasn't meant to come up. We are going to head over and look at the patent for LRAD, which we also heard about in the previous article. US Patent 9693148B1, acoustic hailing device. This is LRAD, and it was applied for on the 8th, the 10th of August 2015, and it was filed by LRAD Corps. Goodness, battery is getting low. 2015, it was a priority to US 14/822-579, which is another patent. In 2017, the application was granted, and in 2017 the publication of US 9693148B1. It is currently active, and it has an adjusted expiration to 2036, the 1st of the 12th, is that? Or is that the 12th of the 1st? Never mind, but it is extended to a 2036. But the abstract, an acoustic hailing device, includes an outer housing and a pair of compression drivers orientated on the outer housing adjacent one another. Each of the compression drivers includes 2 diaphragms orientated facewise relative to one another. With each compression driver, 1 or more waveguide housings are coupled to the outer housing, the 1 or more waveguide housings forming a proportion of a waveguide associated with each of the compression drivers. A pair of driver covers are each coupled to one of the compression drivers, each of the driver covers forming another portion of the waveguide associated with each of the compression drivers. Well, I'm sure that makes sense to some people, but for the majority of us, I'm sure that is just a gobbledygook. But what is claimed is an acoustic hailing device comprising of an outer housing, and again they repeat themselves there, the device of claim wherein the pair of compression drivers are only compression drivers contained on the outer housing. So there's a lot of talk in this pattern about these compression drivers, a method of generating an audible signal comprising providing an electronic signal to 1 or more amplifiers, directing an amplified signal to each pair of compression drivers, the pair of compression drivers being orientated adjacent to one another in an outer housing. Exiting with the amplified signal, each of a pair of diaphragms orientated facewise relative to one another within each of the pair of compression drivers. And this directs sound waves generated by the pair of diaphragms through individual sound ducts with each of a pair of compression drivers, the individual sound ducts being orientated in opposing directions, immediately adjacent the diaphragms being orientated in a common direction in a location at which a generated audible verbal hailing command exits the compression drivers. Description: drivers that can convert an electrical signal into acoustical energy or sound waves in order to radiate the sound waves into the air have been used for some time. Such devices include direct radiators, which directly radiate the generated sound waves, and indirect radiators, which utilize additional elements for radiating the generated sound waves. In a direct radiator, a diaphragm directly vibrates or moves the surrounding air and generates the sound waves related to the electrical signal. In a direct radiator, the diaphragm moves against a surface closely spaced thereto and generates high-pressure compression waves, which are passed through a throat and to a horn or other acoustic generator having a smaller upstream area than the diaphragm. Generally, indirect radiators, such as compression drivers, can generate much higher audio levels when compared with direct radiators, and are used, for the example, in public address systems. So the summary is, in accordance with one embodiment of the invention, an acoustic hailing device is provided, including an outer housing and a pair of compression drivers. How many times in a pattern do you need to mention about outer housing and the pairs of compression drivers. So let's not get too into this because it's sort of very frustrating to read, and I'm sure, as sure can be, it's very, very frustrating to listen to. But that was the LRAD patent US 9693148B1 that was filed in 2015 by the LRAD Corps. Again, if you want to look more into that on yourself, you are more than welcome to, but unlikely that any of you actually will. But surprise me, folks. Leave me a comment below after the fact if you have gone and done some further research into these technologies that we are looking at. So let's go and look at another patent of interest. This is US 7629918B2. This is the patent for a multifunctional radio frequency directed energy system, and this was filed on the 15th of December 2005 by the Raytheon Corporation, or Raytheon Company rather. They in themselves are an interesting corporation, to say the least, in a company that would possibly warrant a video all of their own with some of the things that they have got going on. Priority to US 11/300-876 is another patent. Again, on another day I would have probably included those patents, but you know, as the sort of sad reality of my endeavors as a YouTuber, not very many people actually watch the finished product once I've compiled all of this information. So sort of to save myself sort of needless time and effort producing content that would go unwatched, I haven't bothered including those additional patents in here. But we are going to pay attention to this patent here. It has been granted in 2009 and they have an adjusted expiration to 2026, which is this year. The abstract is an RFDE system that includes an RFDE transmitter and at least one RFDE antenna. The RFDE transmitter and antenna direct high power electromagnetic energy towards a target sufficient to cause high energy damage or disruption of the target. The RFDE system further includes a targeting system for locating the target. The targeted system includes a radar transmitter and at least one radar antenna for transmitting and receiving electromagnetic energy to locate the target. The RFDE system also includes an antenna pointing system for aiming at least one RFD antenna at the target based on the location of the target as ascertained by the targeting system. Moreover, at least a portion of the radar transmitter or at least one radar antenna is integrated within at least a portion of the RFDE transmitter or the at least one RFDE antenna. There are some diagrams I will not confess to understanding. Claims 22 of them. We're not going to read them all, folks, but the multifunctional radio frequency directed energy system has got, as we've established, it has a transmitter and at least one antenna that points towards the target. It has a targeting system for locating the target, and the targeting system including a radar transmitter and at least one radar antenna for transmitting and receiving electromagnetic energy to locate the target, and an antenna pointing system for aiming at least one RFDE antenna at the target based on the location of the target. So let's skip down a little bit because that's sort of pretty much repeating what we have just read. One radio antenna is embodied and at least partially within at least one RFD antenna. The multifunction RFD system wherein the radar transmitter is embodied at least partially within the radio, the RFDE transmitter. The multifunctional RFDE system of Claim 3 wherein the radar transmitter and the RFDE transmitter comprised of a common RF power amplifier. Where are the claims of what it does is what we're trying to find or get to. As I said, if we go through this, it's all about the targeting systems, RFDEs, the description. The present invention relates generally to a radio frequency directed energy, which is RFDE systems, and more particularly to a multifunctional type of RFDE systems. Background of the invention: radio frequency directed energy systems are known in the art for directing high power RF microwave and or millimeter wave electromagnetic energy to destroy or disrupt a target. Although RFDE systems typically serve as military weapons, RFDE systems need not be limited to weapon systems. For example, RFDE systems of the present invention may be used for non-military purposes, such as destroying or disrupting foreign objects, contaminates undesirable atmospheric conditions, or other types of targets. Destroying or disrupting foreign objects, contaminants, undesirable atmospheric conditions. The two towers turned to dust. They were destroyed and disrupted, folks. Raytheon. As for weapon systems, it is important to distinguish between an RFDE weapon system and an electronic warfare system. A primary difference between an RFDE weapon and an electronic warfare system is power and kill mode. Guys, this should be fucking shaking you in your boots to the 6 or 7 people that are probably watching. But an electronic warfare system makes use of prior knowledge of a target it is designed to jam or disrupt. An electronic warfare system uses such a prior knowledge of a target's characteristics, e.g. frequency of operation, method or operation, etc., to disrupt or confuse the target with finesse or a relatively low amount of power. Mimetic warfare comes to mind, guys. An electronic warfare system could be that what they're talking about there. I strongly suspect it is, but I'm sure some of you will have other thoughts and opinions on that. But on the other hand, an RFDE weapon system can go after a broad range of targets. Electronics, biological ordnance, and this is interesting, structures, etc. Remember, the Twin Towers were indeed very large, solid steel structures that turned to dust before our eyes, but we're led to believe that that was in fact the result and the side effects of jet fuel burning for too long and for too higher temperature that caused those two towers to collapse under their own weight. Sure, that happened. But due to its relatively large radiated power, a prior knowledge of intended target characteristics is typical, but is typically not required because the RFDE weapon either burns out or overwhelms the target by the sheer amount of power it radiates. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what it knows about you. It can overwhelm you regardless of preparations or rigidity of the structure. But an ongoing problem with RFDE systems is targeting. Accurately pointing the RF-directed energy beam at the intended target and establishing an accurate range from the system to the target to date. The RFDE system targeting problem has been addressed by using what what may be referred to as auxiliary add-on systems. These add-on systems could include a standalone radar system, a standalone laser range finder, a standalone optical or infrared imaging system, etc. However, these add-on systems add significant cost to the RFDE system. In addition, these add-on systems add significant complexity by requiring a calibration of the element between the RFDE system and the standalone targeting system. So let's leave it at that one, guys, for now. Other than the summary of the invention, the RFDE system of the present invention eliminates the need for a separate standalone targeting system by integrating a targeting system within the RFDE system itself. The RFDE system is a multifunctional in that all or part of the RFD system hardware that functions to direct high power electromagnetic energy also functions to obtain and provide targeting information to aim the high power electromagnetic energy beam. For example, the RFDE transmitter is not only used as the source of the directed electromagnetic energy, but it is also used as the radar transmitter for targeting an object. A relatively simple radar receiver may then be added to the RFDE system. The cost of the overall system is substantially reduced since an expensive radar transmitter is not required. Moreover, the complexity of the system is reduced as calibration of the alignment between the RFDE system and the standalone targeting system becomes unnecessary. So sort of making it as easy as possible to point and shoot, really, is what I'm taking for this. Pointless me asking what you think of it. Unlikely that is going to happen. But according to one aspect of the invention, a multifunctional RFDE system is provided. The RFDE system includes an RFDE transmitter and at least one RFDE antenna. The RFDE transmitter and antenna direct high power electromagnetic energies towards a target sufficient to cause high energy damage or disruption of the target. The RFDE system further includes a targeting system for locating the target. The targeting system includes a radar transmitter and at least one radar antenna for transmitting and receiving electromagnetic energy to locate the target. The RFDE system also includes an antenna pointing system for aiming at least one RFDE antenna at the target based on the location of the target. According to another aspect of the invention, a method is provided for operating an RFDE system. This method includes the steps of utilizing an RFDE transmitter and at least one RFDE antenna to direct high power electromagnetic energy towards a target sufficient to cause high energy damage or disruption of the target. Utilizing a target system, yada yada, woo ray tay to the accomplishment of the foregoing and related ends. The invention then comprises of features hereinafter fully described and particularly pointed out in the claims. The following description of the annexed drawings set forth in detail certain illustrative embodiments of the invention. These embodiments are indicative, however, but a few of the various ways which the principles of the invention may be employed. The multiple purposes for this. Other object advantages and novel features of the invention will become apparent from the following detailed description of the invention when considered in conjunction with the drawing. So there's a brief description of the drawings. How long is it going to be? Yeah, let's clear that. That's the brief description of the drawings, guys. So as I said, patents are very, very interesting, but can be very, very painstaking and tedious to get through. And as we've already been through 3 patents, I'm sure some of you guys are already exasperated, and this has become beyond tedious. So let's leave it there. I mean, as I said, guys, we could go on almost endlessly if we wanted to cover every single patent regarding electromagnetic frequency weapon technology. But maybe we'll come back for that another day, or maybe we won't. So let's go and see if we can break up the monotony of me talking with a video before we think about wrapping things up for this latest installment of Unwatchable Content.
January 3rd, 2026, Caracas, Venezuela, 11:47 p.m. 200 miles offshore, the USS Gerald R. Ford Carrier Strike Group is executing the century's most spectacular deception. The media will call this a raid. They are wrong. They aren't staging an attack. They aren't rehearsing deterrence. They are engineering a state of reality. To insert a Delta Force team into a hostile capital without detection, stealth isn't always the answer. Silence isn't either. Sometimes the optimal solution isn't to disappear. It is to flood the battle space with certainty. Too much signal, too much activity, until nothing beneath it is considered abnormal. This is a paradox. You don't need silence. You need noise. Remember Panama in 1989? The US used rock music to psychologically terrorize the enemy. That was crude harassment. But 2026 is different. This is the evolution from psychological warfare to a technical sonic shield. We are weaponizing tempo, geometry, and human perception. Think about it. Every radar in Venezuela was scanning the sky. Every intelligence officer was filtering audio frequencies. They heard everything. And that was the fatal flaw. When the USS Ford pushes its systems to surge tempo, creating a ceaseless jet engine roar over the Caribbean, the sensors get overloaded, not by malfunction, but by excess information. They don't see an invasion. They see normal dominance. They see standard procedure. And beneath that perfect cover of familiarity, 4 Chinook helicopters are skimming the water, their rotor noise swallowed whole by the calculated chaos above. The Delta Force team isn't sneaking in through the window. They are walking through the front door while the doorman is covering his ears. If you feel proud of American engineering, the kind that turns physics into the ultimate weapon, type "proud" in the comments. Today, we decode the mathematics that turned the Caribbean into an acoustic prison. Let's start with the machine that made it possible. To maintain over 100 aircraft, airborne across the strike group, the USS Ford needs to launch and recover jets at industrial pace. Every 2 minutes, a jet catapults off the deck. Every 3 minutes, another one lands. For 6 straight hours. Old Nimitz-class carriers can't do this. They're limited by steam pressure. Launch too many jets too quickly, the pressure drops, catapults lose power, and jets drop into the ocean. The USS Gerald R. Ford doesn't use steam. It uses electrons. The Electromagnetic Aircraft Launch System, EMALS, is a railgun for aircraft. Electricity flows through coils embedded in the flight deck. Magnetic fields push the launch shuttle forward. The jet accelerates from 0 to 170 miles per hour in 2 seconds. EMALS recharges in 45 seconds. The old steam system needed 4 minutes. Do the math with me. The goal is to keep over 100 aircraft from the strike group in the air constantly. On a traditional carrier, you hit a bottleneck. You can launch, but you can't recover and relaunch fast enough because of the steam recharge time. Gaps appear in the formation. The sonic shield breaks. But with EMALS cycling every 45 seconds, the Ford creates a seamless conveyor belt. It launches a wave of jets, recovers the previous wave, refuels, and shoots them back out before the acoustic decibels ever drop. The Navy calls this sortie generation rate. In this operation, the Ford hit a tempo equivalent to its maximum surge rate of 270 sorties per day. This is operational overmatch. You are cycling aircraft faster than the enemy radar can track them. But the launch system is only half the equation. The other half is logistics. This is where the pit stop theory comes in. On a standard carrier, rearming a fighter jet is a logistical nightmare. You have to bring bombs up from the deep magazines using wire rope elevators, move them manually across the deck, and navigate through a maze of parked aircraft. It's slow, it's dangerous. The USS Ford changed the geometry of the deck. They moved the island, the command tower, further back, creating massive open spaces specifically designed for NASCAR-style pit stops. Using the advanced weapons elevators, which operate on electromagnetic rails rather than cables, ordnance travels from the magazine directly to the flight deck at 150 feet per minute. There is no restaging. There is no waiting. The bomb arrives right next to the wing of the F-35. This reduced the turnaround time, the time from landing to launching again, from 40 minutes down to 22 minutes. That 18-minute saving, multiplied by 100 aircraft, creates an accumulative advantage of 1,800 minutes of operational time. That is how you sustain a sonic shield. You don't just fly faster, you work smarter. But the real secret is power. The A-1B nuclear reactor generates 3 times the electrical capacity of the old Nimitz class. Let's look at the thermodynamics. The old A-4W reactors produced enough electricity for a small town. The new A-1B reactors produce 13,800 volts of distribution capability, enough to power a city. Why do we need 13,800 volts? Because the radar, the catapults, and even the elevators are all hungry for electrons. By eliminating the steam pipes that used to run through the ship, the Navy removed the most maintenance-heavy component of a carrier. No steam leaks, no corrosion, just pure, raw voltage. This power allows us to outcycle the enemy. While their pilots are still refueling on the ground, ours are already back in the air. We force them to fight at a tempo they physically cannot sustain. The USS Gerald R. Ford positioned itself exactly 380 nautical miles northeast of Caracas. Not 350, not 400, exactly 380. Why? The F-35C Lightning II has a combat radius of approximately 770 miles on internal fuel. Position the Ford at 380 miles, and the aircraft can reach Caracas, orbit for 90 minutes, and return with fuel reserves intact. Perfect geometry. The Navy positioned the entire strike group in a clockwise rotation pattern. The Ford sits at the center. Our Lee Burke destroyers orbit at 12, 3, 6, and 9 o'clock positions, each exactly 50 miles from the carrier. This creates overlapping radar coverage. 4 destroyers in diamond pattern means every cubic foot of airspace within 500 miles is monitored simultaneously. Venezuela's Air Force didn't stand a chance. Not because they lacked aircraft, because they lacked information. Every time a Venezuelan Su-30 took off, the strike group knew 18 seconds after wheels up. The pilot would see 12 American fighters already positioned between him and the coast. He'd turn around and land. This is naval quarantine. You don't invade the airspace. You make entering it mathematically suicidal. But the clockwise rotation served another purpose. Fuel management. Jet fuel weighs 6.8 pounds per gallon. An F-35C carries 13,300 pounds internally. Flying in circular pattern with prevailing winds reduces fuel consumption by 11% versus straight-line flight. Run those numbers across the strike group over 6 hours. That 11% efficiency saves roughly 290,000 pounds of fuel. Enough to extend the operation by 90 additional minutes. The geometry wasn't just tactical, it was logistical insurance. Midnight in Caracas. The Delta Force team moves through streets lit only by flickering street lamps. Visibility should be 0. But the operators see everything. We don't use floodlights, we use electrons. Every F-35 in that sonic shield is scanning. The AN/APG-81 radar paints a 3-dimensional picture of the city below. Not visible light, radar energy. But the Caribbean is a radar nightmare. Here is the atmospheric physics problem that usually blinds navies in this region. It's called evaporation ducting. In the hot, humid Caribbean, Water evaporates rapidly from the ocean's surface, creating a layer of dense, moist air right above the waves. When standard radar waves hit this layer, they get trapped. They bend downward. They bounce unpredictably. It creates a ghost image. A radar operator might see a ship that isn't there, or miss a low-flying missile entirely because the radar beam was refracted into the water. This is why the USS Ford has unicorn status. It's the only ship in the fleet equipped with dual-band radar, combining SPY-3 X-band and SPY-4 S-band frequencies. This system was designed specifically to pierce the clutter of the Caribbean archipelago. While single-band radars get confused by the evaporation ducts and islands, the Ford's dual frequencies filter out the geography. The S-band, volume search, scans the upper atmosphere, ignoring the surface clutter. The X-band, horizon search, uses a narrower, higher frequency beam that is less susceptible to moisture refraction. It cuts through the humidity like a laser through fog. The enemy thinks they can hide behind the islands or the humidity. The Ford sees right through them. When the Delta Force team requested overhead surveillance, they got live thermal imaging from an F-35 orbiting 40,000 feet above, updated every 1.2 seconds. This is the invisible floodlight. We illuminate the battlefield with data. But there's a problem with the F-35C. It can reach Caracas in 28 minutes from the Ford's position. 28 minutes is an eternity when your team is compromised. 80 miles closer to the Venezuelan coast, the USS Baton, a Wasp-class amphibious assault ship, has been maintaining radio silence. On her deck sit 18 F-35B Lightning IIs. Now let's talk about the engineering miracle of the F-35B. The F-35C on the Ford launches with a catapult. The F-35B doesn't need one. It creates its own lift. Behind the cockpit sits a massive lift fan. It's not powered by a separate engine. It's powered by the main jet engine through a carbon fiber drive shaft. This is the most stressed mechanical component in aviation history. When the pilot hits the hover button, a clutch engages. This clutch has to transfer 29,000 horsepower from the jet turbine to the lift fan in a split second. That is equivalent to the power of 40 Formula One cars being transferred through a single shaft instantly. Simultaneously, the rear nozzle swivels 90 degrees downward. The plane balances on a column of 40,000 pounds of thrust. Because of this short takeoff and vertical landing (STOVL) capability, the USS Baton doesn't need to turn into the wind to launch. It can launch the F-35B from a standstill, just 80 miles from the target. Because the Baton was positioned closer, F-35Bs can reach Caracas in 11 minutes. Why use the short-range F-35B? Because in literal warfare, we accept a calculated trade-off. We trade range for immediacy. The F-35C on the Ford buys us distance. The F-35B on the Baton buys us time. At 3:00 a.m., when the extraction became contested, F-35Bs were overhead by 3:11. F-35Cs from the Ford arrived as backup at 3:28. This is layered response, the dagger and the sledgehammer. But neither weapon fired a shot. The mere presence of stealth fighters overhead ended the resistance. This is deterrence theory validated. The weapon you don't fire is more powerful than the one you do. So how did the United States capture a head of state without leveling a city? Physics, mathematics, and a $13 billion aircraft carrier. The sonic shield didn't exist because some admiral wanted cool technology. It existed because engineers asked a better question. Not how do we destroy, but how do we win without destruction? The answer was mathematics. Position the fleet at the optimal radius. Launch aircraft at sustainable frequency. Create acoustic camouflage through sustained noise. None of this required new physics. It required applying known physics with unprecedented precision. On the night of January 3rd, that ship coordinated over 100 aircraft without a single mid-air incident. It provided real-time intelligence while jamming enemy communications. And when the mission ended, It recovered every single aircraft safely. 0 casualties, 0 collateral damage. The teenager operating the catapult controls on the Ford doesn't know he just participated in a historic operation. He's a 19-year-old from Wisconsin who enlisted because college was too expensive. But his job, launching aircraft every 45 seconds for 6 straight hours without error, was the difference between success and catastrophe. American military dominance doesn't come from billion-dollar missiles. It comes from 19-year-olds executing physics problems perfectly under pressure. The United States doesn't need to invade your country. We can end your government from 380 miles offshore using mathematics. And sound waves. That's not a threat. That's a physics demonstration.
They are flying under the radar, less than 100 feet above ground. At this altitude, there is zero margin for error. The target is President of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro. The drop zone is Fort Tiuna, the most fortified square mile in the country. But the US isn't knocking on the front door. It's sending in their most elite operators, US Army Delta Force. On January 2nd, 2026, Operation Absolute Resolve commenced. US Cyber Command struck first, shutting down the power grid and disrupting military communications across Caracas. Then came the heavy hitters. B-1 Lancers delivering precision payloads, targeting key infrastructure and further damaging command networks. Under the cover of chaos, Delta Force commandos prepared to move in. The Venezuelan military, despite disruptions, returned heavy gunfire and launched surface-to-air missiles. A helicopter was hit, but it remained operational. Moments later, squadrons of F-22 Raptors, F-35-2 Lightning, F-18 Super Hornets swept in and began sanitizing the airspace. High above, MQ-9 Reaper drones captured it all, relaying live data directly to the operators on the ground. Delta Force swiftly breached the inner compound. They knew exactly where Maduro and his wife were hiding. They neutralized any and all resistance, isolated the target, and moved. Within moments, the president of Venezuela was gone, secured on a Black Hawk bound for the USS Iwo Jima. The entire operation lasted less than 30 minutes, with minor injuries and no US casualties.
Breaking news tonight, Venezuela's leader captured by American forces, arriving in New York just moments ago after a daring raid inside the country's capital.
The United States hit Venezuela with a large-scale strike early Saturday and said its president, Nicolas Maduro, had been captured and flown out of the country.
Has offered everything. He's offered everything. You're right. You know why? Because he doesn't want around with the United States.
On the deck of the Iwo Jima, the FBI and DEA took Maduro into their custody. The moment that transport plane crossed international waters, the operation became irreversible. By early morning, they were on American soil, Stewart Air National Guard Base in New York, and this is the image history will remember. Escorted by federal agents in handcuffs, Nicolas Maduro was processed into the US. But how does a sitting president of another nation become a criminal in the eyes of the US government? To answer that, one thing has to be understood. For years, Washington didn't view Maduro as a legitimate president. In March 2020, the US Department of Justice unsealed indictment that charged Maduro with narco-terrorism, drug trafficking, and conspiracy to import into the United States. The indictment alleged that Maduro and his associates had turned Venezuela into a base for drug cartels, using state resources to facilitate the trafficking. The US offered a $15 million reward for information leading to his capture, but Maduro was well protected, surrounded by loyalists, fortified inside Venezuela, protected by military installations. For years, he appeared beyond reach, until the calculus changed. Months before the operation, CIA clandestine services deployed a small team of covert agents inside Venezuela. Their mission was to closely monitor Maduro's every move. They recruited a source close to him, someone with access, someone who could provide real-time information.
multiple people who are extremely close to Maduro. And you're offering them, hey, you live in this crappy socialist country, we're going to give you freedom. Hey, you have children? Your children get to come to the United States of America and they get an A++ education. And oh, by the way, did you know there's a $50 million bounty on his head? And you're going to get $50 million.
With the NSA listening to phones and the NGA watching from space, they gathered a comprehensive pattern of life. They identified his isolation windows, moments when he was vulnerable, and they began planning his capture. President Trump assembled a core planning team consisting of Senior Aide Stephen Miller, State Secretary Marco Rubio, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, CIA Director John Ratcliffe. They met regularly for months, refining every detail of what would become Operation Absolute Resolve. Meanwhile, at an undisclosed site in Kentucky, the Pentagon constructed a full-scale replica of Maduro's compound. Delta Force commandos rehearsed the mission over and over. By late 2025, the U.S. Navy executed a massive naval buildup around the Caribbean, positioning the USS Gerald R. Ford supercarrier and the amphibious assault ship USS Iwo Jima. Over 15,000 troops, 11 warships. Then, they secured the sky. F-35 Lightning stealth fighters, 12 F-22 Raptors were deployed to various bases in the region. Every piece was in position, but two factors kept the mission on hold: weather and target confirmation. For days, thick clouds and heavy rain blanketed Caracas. Commanders insisted on waiting for clear skies to maximize satellite overwatch visibility. They also needed absolute confirmation of Maduro's live location. He constantly rotated between 6 to 8 safe houses. He relied on Cuban-trained bodyguards with strict no-phone rules to evade signal intelligence. But on the night of January 2nd, the weather finally broke and a narrow window opened. The CIA contacted their inside source, confirming Maduro was inside Fort Tiuna. President Trump surrounded his war cabinet at Mar-a-Lago and gave the final order. Across 20 bases throughout the hemisphere, over 150 aircrafts launched within minutes. As they converged on Venezuela, EA-18 Growlers began jamming Venezuelan radar. Tomahawk cruise missiles and anti-radiation missiles struck early warning radars and surface-to-air missile sites. Venezuela's air defenses were dismantled within minutes. Fighter jets bombed on the tarmac before they could even become airborne. Behind that rolling wall of suppression, the Night Stalkers lifted off from Iwo Jima. 9 helicopters, MH-60 Black Hawks, and MH-47 Chinooks skimming at just 100 feet above the ocean. One Venezuelan security guard later said the attack began without warning, when drones suddenly appeared and flew over their positions, leaving them unsure of how to react. He explained that shortly after, a small number of helicopters arrived and deployed only a limited number of soldiers, far fewer than expected, but unlike anything they had faced before. When the fighting started, he described it as a massacre, saying that despite having hundreds of men, they had no chance. As he put it, they were shooting with such precision and speed, it seemed like each soldier was firing 300 rounds per minute. He said that their own weapons were useless, and at one point, the attackers used something that he could not describe. It felt like an intense sound wave that caused severe pain, nosebleeds, vomiting, and left many unable to move. According to his account, the small attacking force killed hundreds without suffering losses, and after that device was used, the survivors were physically incapable of resisting.
Anyone can turn off the propaganda by turning off their radio or television. The ultimate weapon in the info war would be so secret, so invisible, so undetectable, you would never know your mind was under attack. At Laurentian University in Ontario, Canada, a young student is about to undergo one of the strangest experiences of her life. They're hooking Denise's brain up to an electroencephalograph, or EEG machine. For 30 to 40 minutes, this will monitor her brainwaves, while these electric coils attached on either side of her head will immerse her brain in an electromagnetic field. Her brain actually completes the circuit between the two coils. The field pulsing through her brain is less powerful than one given off by a digital clock radio, but acutely controlled and focused at specific parts of the brain, it will open Denise's mind to outside suggestion by this man.
Can I do a switch to see the right left hemisphere? Use your frontal attention.
Dr. Michael Persinger is a professor of psychology and neuroscience. He is designing ways to put the power of mind control to good use. Dr. Persinger's research focuses on brain trauma, and he uses carefully controlled doses of electromagnetic radiation to induce relaxation and alleviate pain.
So what Sandra did was to initiate a opiate releasing pattern. That's a burst firing field that is stimulated once every 4 seconds. And that produces relaxation and a very pleasant sensation. Similarly, using the appropriate field, we can induce fear and apprehension, but clearly that would be unethical in that setting.
Dr. Persinger's tests suggest that carefully programmed electromagnetic frequencies can tap into individual brains and influence people's emotions.
The cognitive processes of the human brain are really quite simple. And if you understand how they work, you can make entire populations think and decide the manner in which you wish.
Many experts are skeptical of such an Orwellian scenario, but Persinger thinks the implications are chillingly real.
Suppose you generate a field that produces fear, fundamental fear, in large numbers of people. And then over the television, more traditional ways, you say, the reason we're having this fear is because of this particular group. And now you start to move the population believing in the direction that you wish.
To influence 250 million people, the equivalent of the entire population of the United States, may not be that difficult. According to Dr. Persinger, we already have the technology, satellites and television and radio transmitters. Mind control may already be happening. We know the mysterious PSYOPs plane can beam persuasive sounds and pictures into people's television sets. Will it someday beam disturbing frequencies directly into the mind? Mind control will be the ultimate non-lethal weapon. The prospect of a war without pain or death, where victory comes without a single shot being fired, should be a cause for jubilation. Smart military technologies and non-lethal weapons could at least prevent the awful carnage of large-scale head-to-head combat. What then can we expect of war in the 21st century? Which will frighten us more? The threat of unspeakable destruction from plasma cannons and lasers on high, or the prospect of national computer crashes? Paradoxically, the promise of truly bloodless war may come only with the most devastating weapon of all. If the human mind and will become the battleground of the future, War 2020 may be won without so much as a whimper, let alone a bang.
Now I know the video we have just seen is an oldie, but it is a goodie, and it is a video that I have included in multiple videos regarding this subject from the Discovery Channel back in the very early 1990s, talking about the US military and their intentions to utilize electromagnetic and radio frequency weapons. And back then in 1990, early 1990s, the claims were everything that was needed in order for the United States government to carry out a widespread targeted mind control electromagnetic frequency attack on its own citizens already existed. But make of it, as of always, what you will, folks, and make of it what you will with this last little article from orchard.org, which again is another website that I have featured before. This is a 3-page PDF, but if I just make it a little bit larger for you there, you can see that this is a list for patents that include directed energy weapons and targeted individual patents. And you can see here on the left-hand side of the screen the amount of patents. Now, we have looked at quite a few of these, but not all of them. As I said, it would take an eternity. And as some of you guys do know, patents are not exactly the easiest things to read. But let me make it as large as possible here. And you can see for yourself there is a whole list of microwave weaponries and patents for those microwave electromagnetic radio frequencies, weapons for directed energy and targeting individuals. I'm not going to say the list is endless, because it is. It does end there. Look, guys, you can see quite a considerable amount of patents there. Let me scroll through. Let's get back to the top before I do this. So we come over and look at this, and you can see the symptom MK, V2K, V2K, MK is mind control. RV, I'm not sure what that stands for, but these are quite a lot of 10%. We're going to have to go and charge the phone. 10% battery left. But as you can see, there's sort of what type of weaponry here is, and at the very end we can come to a short description, although some of the descriptions are a little bit difficult to read. Pulsative manipulation of central nervous system, method and device producing a desired brain state via magnetic waves, weapons with integrated targeting systems to locate targets, and that is damage, disrupt electronics, biological entities and physical structures. That was we actually just looked at. Remotely transmits intelligible subjective sound into a target consciousness, voice to skull, allows information to be remotely conveyed to a subject via electromagnetic waves, putting thoughts into your heads, ideas into your heads, subliminal manipulation to subjective emotions via a remotely directed audio waves. Some of these are very disturbing. All the moods, emotions, sleep states via remote applied frequencies and waveforms. And again, I'm not going to say this list goes on endlessly, but because it does end. But some of the things that these can claim that they can do determines this one here: monitors and determines undesirable behavior in humans via wireless microprocessors in vehicles, personal property and homes. That's just smart devices, folks, and that can remotely determine if you are up to any desirable behaviors, folks. So sort of remote viewing is not sort of oh goodness, what's the word I'm looking for? Refined and only for sort of people like Eleven from Stranger Things and sort of certain individuals that possess some talents. Technology and electromagnetic frequencies can remotely view us. But as I said, guys, let's not get too into this. I did just want to highlight it all looks a little bit more impressive when it's very small. But there is a whole lot and host of US patents, that's just US patents, for electromagnetic frequency weaponry. If or not you want to come and look at some of those at your own leisure, it is entirely up to you, but highly unlikely that anyone actually will. But feel free to prove me wrong. So that's it, guys. Let's head back to the virtual basement and wrap things up. And for those of you who are eagerly awaiting the dancing girl, there's not much time left for you to wait before you see her strutting her stuff and play us out for this evening. So that is about it, folks, for one day. Hopefully those of you who have made it this far into this evening's video have found it informative, enjoyable, and maybe even a little bit educational. Make of it what you will, as always. But what I make of it is this is nothing more than a hot air story, some propaganda, probably designed to warn Iran, which is currently bracing itself for an US military attack, US military invasion. And as for the whole Venezuelan situation, talking to somebody off of YouTube recently in the last sort of few weeks who come to me and sort of said, what are your thoughts about Venezuela? You're sort of in the part of the world where this is going on not that far away from you, and although that is sort of true, I am not that far away from Venezuela. I am not exactly on its doorstep, but some of the weird weather that I have experienced in the last few months might suggest that there has been some clandestine nefarious operations undergoing in the area that has affected Venezuela. But I really, the whole entire purpose of the Venezuelan conflict from the United States was the excuse Trump needed to enforce the Alien Enemies Act, which is a wartime policy that was used during World War II in order to round up United States citizens that may have been of German, Japanese or Italian descent, and those citizens of descent of German, Japanese or Italian origins found themselves in internment camps. And what this has, the Alien Enemies Act being introduced in modern times, has given the given ICE the green light to do exactly what they are doing, which is a very, very large I told you so on my part. For anyone who watched my Migrant Solutions video that I uploaded a couple of years ago, exactly what I said would happen in that video is happening in contemporary times. But as for this Venezuelan syndrome, we do know that this frequency technology, directed energy weapons, these things do exist. They have been used in the past, and it was a few years ago when the announcement from the United States government, from the Pentagon itself, announcing that some of its operatives based in Cuba had indeed been victims of frequency-based weapons. This was the announcement that confirmed conspiracy theorists who have been wearing their tinfoil hat for many, many decades were in fact right. It was the confirmation that this technology exists. And this recent story, although I doubt it actually, I doubt the testimony of the security guard, I don't doubt that the United States did in fact use a sonic weapon in Venezuela, and they will possibly be using them again in further conflicts that they may be undergoing. So that is it, folks, for today. All that remains for me to say is may the force be with us all. Remember to be excellent to each other, and until next time, take care. This is Ardy signing out for now. And I know I got that back to front. It should have been be excellent to each other and then may the force be with you. But sorry, I'm not doing another take. I've already done 15 as it is. See you next time, folks.
Sit, Ubu, sit. Good dog.
Be excellent to each other. Party on, dudes!
Hey, Luke. May the force be with you.
All right. Take care now. Bye-bye then.